5 Ohio State players are starting to force Ryan Day and the coaching staff to rethink their. I don't mean 5 guys having a nice August so far. I mean players who entered fall camp with one role expected of them, and through the first week, they're making a legitimate argument that role might not be big enough. And stick around for number 5, because the 5th player is the one I don't think I have even said his name on this podcast yet, because that's the fun part about fall camp. We spend the entire off season building these depth charts in our heads. We decide who the starter is. We decide who the backup is. We decide which freshman needs another year. We get into the scheme and say, well, they play this scheme. And if they don't play this scheme, what player can fill this type of role? And then they actually start practicing. And suddenly, Isaiah West is taking first team running back reps. A true freshman, might be Ohio State's starting nickel for running back, who barely gets talked about, is already being told he's going to play, and one defensive lineman most people weren't even discussing as the favorite to start is currently running with the ones. So today on this episode of the Buckeye Huddle podcast, I'm giving you 5 Buckeyes who are forcing their way into bigger roles, not necessarily starters, but bigger roles. And number 5 might be the most interesting because it could completely change we view one of Ohio State's biggest position battles entering August. So I'm John Rhodes with BuckeyeHuddle.com, where we give you deep Ohio State coverage, elite recruiting intel, and none of the toxic noise out there. Just straight talk here for you. Let's start with the one I've teased a little bit before. The first one is Isaiah West. This may not be only Bo Jackson's backfield. In fact, if you're still automatically calling Beau Ohio State's starting running back, you might be working off an outdated depth chart, because the first week of camp has told us something very different. Isaiah West has been getting significant work with Ohio State's first team, while Beau Jackson has been working with the second group. And Ryan Day didn't exactly downplay West's offseason either. Day has said West had one of the best off seasons of anybody in the program. And that's not nothing. I mean, that does mean a lot. And now I'm not telling you Bo Jackson suddenly isn't the go-to guy, is that going to play. That he absolutely is going to play. He's also coming back from off shoulder surgery, so we need some restraint before turning August reps into permanent domination there. And Isaiah West had a fantastic offseason, so this could be kind of reward for that as well. But here is what has changed. Beau no longer looks like the unquestioned centerpiece featured back of the offense that some people thought he was. And Isaiah West isn't just filling in anymore. He's making Ohio State make a decision. If West keeps running with the ones and keeps taking advantage of those opportunities and looks like the back Ohio State trusts most entering into September, at some point, these stop being temporary reps. They become the actual depth chart. And that could change this offense considerably. But let me know what you think about Isaiah West, Bo Jackson, and another running back coming up here soon. What do you think about the whole situation? Let me know in the comments. That's the key distinction, though. Last year gives Bo credibility. He's the proven player. He's been in meaningful games. You know what you have. There are some people saying that he could even be a Heisman contender this season. But coaches don't hand out September touches because of what depth chart projections said in May. Ryan Day has also made it direct about this position. He called running back a group that has to have a great preseason if Ohio State is going to get where it wants to go. So there is urgency here, and West apparently heard it. The question isn't really whether both backs will play. They both will. We know this. The question is whether we've gone from Bo Jackson and Isaiah West to Isaiah West and Bo Jackson and another running back. Like I said, we're going to talk about here soon. Those sound almost identical, but they're not. Because whoever establishes himself as the first option is probably getting the first chance to seize the high leverage carries against Texas. And right now, West is forcing Ohio State to at least consider him as that ability. Next up, number 2. I have Jay Timmons. You've heard about Jay Timmons a bunch. There's a lot of people talking about him. Just want to quickly overview him here, and then we'll get to a guy that we haven't talked as much about. So the freshman may already, have the defense feeling a need for him out there. So let's go to the defense now, because I think this one has gone from just kind of an interesting story to potentially one of the biggest developments of camp. Jay Timmons might actually start this season. That's much different than saying a 5-star freshman looked talented. Ohio State has those guys consistently. Timmons has been consistently repping with the first team defense at nickel, and the important part is what happened, or what appears to have happened around him. During the spring, Earl Little looked like a potential answer inside, but Little has been getting work deeper at safety alongside Jalen McLean, and that has created an opportunity at nickel that somebody, i.e. Jay Timmons, is going to look at and say, I have an opportunity here. Timmons hasn't just stepped on into that opening, he attacked it. It has been described when I was talking to one of the guys here at Buckeye Huddle, the buzz around him as reaching a fever, and said he's rapidly moving through whatever learning curve remained. But here's the part I keep coming back to. Devin Sanchez talked about Timmons like some freshman, like some freshman Ohio State hopes to. Basically talked like he's the team that Ohio State is going to need most, especially against a team like Texas. He said about Texas, we're going to need him. Against it, we're going to need him. Against Oregon, we're going to need him. There's a consistent theme here. The tough games, the big games when Ohio State is going to face deep and healthy and talented wide receiver rooms, you're going to need somebody like Jay Timmons. You are going to need Jay Timmons, because nickel isn't exactly the where you hide the freshman. You're putting him in traffic. It's arguably one of the most difficult positions to play out there in the Big Ten. You're making him communicate. You're asking him to process motion, route common fits, some very talented slot wide receivers, and Ohio State opens with a schedule that gives him virtually no runway. Texas arrives week 2. People better that week 2. That's why Timmons making this push now matters so very much. If he wins the job, Ohio State isn't just simply saying, oh, the freshman's talented. They're saying we trust this freshman to be on a championship level defense, which is responding immediately to what the coaches are trying to do with him. And that's why out of everybody on this list, Timmons may have the biggest change from what we thought Ohio State's defensive plans were for him back in the spring. Now, number 3 is a player working his way into the offensive plan. That is Jacoby Jackson. Ohio State keeps telling us he's going to play. Now, here's the guy I think fans might still be overlooking. Jacoby Jackson is somebody that fans need to know about. We just talked about Isaiah West. We just talked about Beau Jackson. But Jacoby Jackson is going to need a lot of discussion here on this offense as well, because every conversation about Ohio State is generally, or Ohio State running backs, is generally about Isaiah West versus Beau Jackson. And I understand that. I just did it myself, okay? It's an important conversation to have, and we need to have it. But Jacoby Jackson is quietly making it harder and harder for Ohio State to treat him like some freshman, because he's a 7th-year senior. He's a dude that is entering his 7th year and is going to be a contributor on this team. He became the first player to lose his during August camp, doing it after 5 practices, allowing what has already been described as a strong spring and offseason. And then came perhaps the simplest piece of camp intel on this entire thing, is that Jacoby will play for us, I was told. People are saying Jacoby will play for them. He will be he's going to be a starter. That doesn't mean that, but he is going to play for them. Ohio State keeps telling you Jacoby Jackson is going to play. Maybe it's time to believe them, because while everybody is arguing about Isaiah West and Beau Jackson for a running back 1, Jacoby Jackson, just the first Buckeye to lose his black stripe during August camp. More importantly, the reporting from inside the program couldn't be much clearer. A lot of quotes, a lot of people basically insinuating that Jacoby Jackson play for them. That doesn't mean that he's taking over the backfield. In fact, that's what makes this interesting. Ohio State doesn't need him to play, or doesn't need him to play to, have a deep running back room. They have other guys, but he's a 7th-year college player. He's experienced. He has good hands. Beau Jackson praised his vision, and Ohio State can potentially use him in short yardage situations and around the goal line, or even in split backfield situations. That's how somebody goes from third running back to a guy whose role matters every Saturday. And if Jacoby Jackson keeps earning trust, Arthur Smith suddenly doesn't have a two-back problem for the defenses to solve. They might have a three-back problem. That's what I like most about this. His role doesn't have to come at the expense of West or Beau. He can be somebody that's back in the backfield with them and hit dudes, be a lead blocker, kind of like Quinshon Judkins was for Ohio State a few times. Football fans sometimes think of depth charts a little too clearly. You got the 1, the 2, the 3, but an incredible offensive coordinator doesn't necessarily think like that. He thinks who is going to add value to the offense just on the field. And Jacoby Jackson, one of those guys. Maybe West gives you one thing, Beau gives you another thing, and Jacoby Jackson becomes the experienced, situational, selfless player who's reliable on third down, short yardage, supposed to be knocking dudes over and being a tough runner, a tough blocker out there. So there's goal line work, short yardage situations, split backfield where you might see him as maybe a lead blocker or a decoy. That is a role that he can definitely do, and he's forcing Ohio State to try and carve it out for him. Another player forcing his way into snaps is one we all kind of expect. Henry Jr. Wide receiver 4 may not be enough for this man. He may just be out there starting on game 1. So let's go to receiver, because Ohio State having a ridiculously talented freshman receiver isn't exactly breaking news anymore, right? We're not super excited by this, or we're not super surprised by this. We are excited. But at this point, Brian Hartline, and now, of course, as Hankton, could probably find a 5-star wideout hiding behind the Wendy's on High Street if he really wanted to, because Chris Henry Jr.'s situation is different. Henry entered camp with a fairly obvious pathway. Jeremiah Smith is Jeremiah Smith. Brandon Ennis is the veteran. Devin McEwen was brought in from UTSA, 152, I think it was, career catches and nearly 1,700 yards of production. So Henry, yes, talented freshman, probably going to be somebody you see rotate in a little bit, could possibly maybe start a game or two or something, but they're going to get him snaps, they're going to develop him, they're going to see where it goes. Except he may already be pushing past that timeline. The camp report, recording out there from what I have seen says Henry is getting open, using his size, catching everything while working among the top group of receivers. And that's where this gets interesting, because there's a difference between being too talented and keep off the field and too trustworthy to keep off the field, right? Young receivers at Ohio State are almost always talented enough. The hurdle usually comes with everything else. Can they entire route tree? Can they line up correctly? Can they block? Can Julian Sayin trust that you'll be where you're supposed to in the Texas game and on 3rd and 7? I mean, it's not just wide receivers. It's not just freshmen. It can be transfers too. You catch the ball when it's thrown to you. I remember on 3rd down last year against Texas, Sayin gave a really good ball to Max Clare, his first touch of the season, and he dropped it there on the sideline. So if Henry starts checking those boxes of trustworthiness and things they can do, Ohio State has a problem. But that's a they'll happily accept that problem of who do you play, because then you're no longer figuring out how to get a freshman 8 snaps. You're figuring out who's snap taking. One projection is the material has him beginning year 3 around wide receiver 4, but potentially working his way towards something even larger as the season progresses. And remember the larger context here. Ohio State just lost Carnell Tate. Smith is going to receive an unbelievable amount of defensive attention. You have to put dudes in there that are going to help take that attention away. Chris Henry Jr. might be able to do it. Brandon Ennis might be able to do it. We've already talked about how Devin McEwen has elite abilities that could do it as well. But if Chris Henry Jr. continues doing what he's doing in August, he can turn that wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 conversation into a 4-man fight very, very quickly. Final one here. And then one man we have not talked much about at all. I don't even know if I've said his name on the podcast yet since this podcast has happened. Beau Atkinson, the starter nobody is talking about. And finally, this is the one I find the most fascinating, because if you ask Buckeye fans, before camp, who would start opposite of Kenyatta Jackson, Beau Atkinson probably wouldn't have dominated the answers. In fact, I was talking to a Buckeye fan the other day, and they thought, "Oh, I thought Beau Atkinson transferred." No. You are probably thinking of Quay Russaw, who came from Alabama, Zion Ziggy Grady, who flashed as a freshman, has serious upside, Carter Wilder, the exciting young name. Yet through the opening practices, Beau Atkinson has been running with the first team a lot. The most surprising Ohio State starter right now might just be Beau Atkinson, because while everyone spent the offseason talking about Alabama transfer Quay Russaw and sophomore Zion Grady, Atkinson has been the defensive end running with the first team defense opposite of Kenyatta Jackson. And I know that, I know what some of you were thinking. Didn't this guy just barely make an impact last season? He wasn't exactly what we thought he'd be. And you would be correct if you're saying that, okay? But that's also why this is worth paying attention to, because this is development U. This is where you get better and you develop. And if you're somebody who puts your nose on the grindstone, you can develop and get better. Atkinson already proved he can produce at the Power 4 level when he had 7.5 sacks at North Carolina in 2024. And the word around Ohio State is that he's had a tremendous offseason. Does that guarantee? No, we still need to see what happens in the rest of fall camp. In fact, Zion Grady is still a serious threat to eventually win the job, and is going to play in this job as well. But the Atkinson isn't just being handed anything. He's currently holding first team reps in one of the deepest competitions on Ohio State's roster. Maybe the question isn't why Beau Atkinson is with the ones. Maybe, just maybe, it's why we all assumed he wouldn't be. And this matters because Ohio State has an enormous problem to solve up front. They lost of 4 defensive line starters. Caden McDonald was a unanimous All-American, Big Ten Defensive Lineman of the Year. Caden Curry produced 11 sacks, 16.5 tackles for loss. You don't just casually that stuff. You have to make sure you get talent, you develop the talent, and you put the players in the best position to play. Ohio State's answer appears to be depth in this situation, which it kind of makes sense for the entire defense with how deep it is. You got Kenyatta Jackson, Edric Houston, Will Smith Jr., James Smith, John Walker, Quay Russaw, Zion Grady, and now you have Beau Atkinson, who could, if he does line up to the other side, kind of does make me think of Jack Sawyer a little bit. So you know what? Get a strip sack against Texans, and I'll love you forever. I'll love you forever, Beau. So this group has been formidable. With their 2 deep, and Larry Johnson intends to roll pretty heavily with these guys, from what I've been told. And maybe Atkinson ultimately loses the starting designation to Grady. I'm not saying that Atkinson's won it for sure. That remains very possible. But Atkinson is about earning. But August, is about earning opportunity. Atkinson came into camp surrounded by players with more hype. He's currently the guy lining up with the ones, and that means he's forcing the coaches to take him seriously. And if he's forcing them to take them seriously and to do that, that's what he needs to do to see time on the field and maybe be with the ones against Ball State. So put all 5 of these things together. Isaiah West is threatening to change the order of the running back room. Jay Timmons is trying to take a starting nickel job as a true freshman. Jacoby Jackson has gone from forgotten transfer to a player Ohio State says will be involved. Chris Henry Jr. is trying to turn wide receiver into something much, much bigger than that. And Beau Jackson currently holding first team reps in a defensive end battle. Fans expected somebody else would win. We haven't seen a winner yet. Still don't know, but we will definitely find out as time goes on, as scrimmages happen, and that's what makes fall camp so fun. The biggest developments aren't always the superstars looking like superstars. Sometimes it's discovering the depth chart we spent 8 months talking about may have not been right. At all. And we're only through the first week here, and we're going to have more weeks talking about this, talking about everything else. So subscribe here to the to Buckeye Huddle. If you're on podcasts, a 5-star rating and review helps us as well on the Buckeye Huddle podcast. And let us know. Tell me in the comments, which of these 5 has surprised you the most? One do you actually expect to start, actually start, not just get snaps, but actually start when Ohio State goes to Texas. Thanks so much for listening and watching the Buckeye Huddle. We appreciate you being here. Have a good one.